Okay. Welcome everyone to our Friday Life Factory session of May. In this live session today, we will delve into the fintech industry in Iraq with our guest, Mohammed Alkhafaji, founder of Pure Platform. We will be also examining the solutions, startups, and initiatives that are paving the way for a digital financial ecosystem in Iraq. From mobile payment to digital wallets to blockchain solutions, and also alternative lending platforms. We will explore how these innovations are boosting financial inclusion in Iraq and also driving economic growth as well. We are super honored to feature the story of Pure Platform, a cross-border e-commerce platform with integrated fintech space and token-based features. Founded in 2019 by Mohammed Khafaji, a tech innovator and a computer science expert with more than 20 years of experience. Uh, you can ask your questions in the comments, and we will answer them for you during our Q&A session at the end of our Friday Life Factory live session. Now over to you, Muhammad. So tell us a little bit more about you and what made you start Pure Platform.
Well, first, thank you for having me here today, Mohammed. So my name is Mo Al-Khafaji, Mohammed Al-Khafaji. I left Iraq when I was 15. I went to the US and I finished my high school as well as my undergrad and graduate school in the US in the field of computer science. I've started 7 companies in the past 25 or so years. They were all in obviously technology, health tech, fintech, and other areas as well. Pure Platform is
Yeah,
the last of them, and it's the only one that targets the customers or users outside of the U.S.
yeah,
Pure Platform was started in 2019 after a visit that I made to Iraq. Back then, it was my first visit after leaving when I was younger, and I noticed how difficult it was initially to participate in the digital economy system or progress that we've seen. I mean, obviously, it wasn't as fair a comparison between being in Chicago or in the U.S. and Iraq in terms of payments
yeah.
and e-commerce and so on. But nonetheless, the comparison was there, and I thought there has to be a better way to conduct to browse, to shop online, as well as to actually do payments, and that transpired in the founding and the starting of Pure Platform in Iraq.
Oh, great, great. Thank you so much for sharing your story, your background, and also how did your experience led to creating such an aspiring platform, which is Pure Platform, and how also at the moment that it's functioning in Iraq and people people actually getting benefit from it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, from your experience, I want to know that how has the fintech in Iraq progressed, and what factors influence its development so far?
Um, uh, the progress it's a little bit hard to say because of the lack of transparency, lack of public audit
Yeah,
of what companies are actually contributing to this industry, such as mobile payment, wallet payment, and other credit card issuers in Iraq. It's very hard to assess the progress. I don't know if you can trust the numbers that are published around, but you can feel
yeah,
it. Obviously, a pure platform. We offer different or various forms of payments, and we see an increase in the number of customers who are using mobile, different types of mobile wallets, as well as credit cards in purchasing. In terms of
yeah,
generally speaking, with the factors impacting the progress of fintech in Iraq,
hmm,
I mean, I think despite the perplexity or extreme difficulty of introducing a digital payment infrastructure in a predominantly cash-based economy like Iraq, I think there is still a tremendous opportunity, and there are many factors that can make the market ripe for such disruptive transformations. If you break these factors into a couple of categories, I would include the first category. In the first
Hmm.
category, I would include the makeup of the population. I think
Yeah.
the makeup of the population significantly supports such a development because in Iraq you have about the median age is about 20, which means 50% of the population is under the age of 20. And also, last time I
Exactly.
read, the mobile and internet penetration has been significant in Iraq, even compared to other countries in the region. I remember reading something like there are over 40 million devices issued, mobile devices. Now, granted, not all of them are uniquely possessed by each individual customer, but it's a large number nonetheless, as well as you have the internet penetration being over 50%. Last time I read about this. Between the
Yeah.
makeup of the population and between the circumstances that surround such industry or this sector specifically, you have the lack of access to financial as well as banking services. So Iraq is akin to Africa, where there's an explosion of growth in mobile and wallet payments because simply because there is no alternative. Banks do not offer such services, and you don't have financial institutions that are available for funding, lending, and other aspects, or banking in general. And this makes it very ripe for fintech companies to step in and make a significant impact.
Yeah.
Other smaller factors, but important nonetheless, would be, I think, the actual need in the industry arising from logistical issues, and this has been very significant in the last 2 or 3 months, where
Mm.
it's been so difficult to acquire foreign currencies in Iraq. To transfer or exchange currency locally, as well as to do cross-border transactions. And for a country like Iraq that relies heavily on imports, especially from neighboring countries,
Yeah.
this makes it very difficult, but equally an opportunity for opportunists in this field to provide such services and solve such problems. So it makes it a very green field for new innovation, especially in this field, in this sector.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all of this insight. Of course, I agree 100% on all of that because Iraq is really depending on uh, getting supplies from outside of its country, and also uh, being these transactions getting very difficult because we don't have such or such services that have not been developed yet inside of the country in terms of let's say international shipping or and all of that. It makes it, yeah, it really makes it kind of difficult. And you mentioned a lot of challenges that you know fintech or um, entrepreneurs in that field, if they want to innovate in in fintech industry in Iraq. But also with it, you mentioned that Iraq like a green field, a lot of innovation opportunities. Now, I want to know what challenges do Iraqi fintech startups face, and how can they be addressed for growth?
Um, um, in various lives that I had speaking to our customers at Pure Platform,
Yeah.
I've always talked about the challenges and the hurdles that you have in Iraq, starting especially in the fintech field, starting with the regulatory hurdles, the challenges with anything that has to do with the regulations, laws, especially around CBI in Iraq.
Hmm.
You mentioned earlier in the interview something about disruptive technologies. Talking about blockchain and other technologies. There
Yeah.
is, blockchain is a it's almost like a forbidden word in Iraq. No one is allowed to talk about blockchain.
Yeah.
It's like you talk about drugs or other areas. Incorrectly, a lot of people, especially, which surprisingly, a lot of experts in the area equate blockchain to cryptos and crypto currencies, Bitcoin and so on, and then okay, everybody's losing their money, and that's we should not have blockchain in Iraq. Blockchain is much larger than that, but it's even bigger than blockchain. We're talking about a lot of innovative technologies that even banks are taking advantage of. JP Morgan is using blockchain in the US to do cross-border settlement much faster than today,
Uh,
while in Iraq, talking about some of these crypto tokens as assets to settle some of these transfers or payments as illegal. You can't talk about it. So I think regulation it needs to have a second look at how it can at the end of the day protect the consumer, but at the same time not stop innovation or put brakes on development in this or improvements in this area. Other challenges that I've seen very big in Iraq, which is different than other countries in the region that I've
mm-hmm.
traveled to, is the identity management and identity verification. You see, I've had several conversations with the
Yeah.
big managers at some of the bigger banks in Iraq about the significant the number of rejects by Iraqi cards from international vendors. We've experimented with using Iraqi cards to purchase from outside of Iraq, but it's been so difficult because a lot of these vendors outside they put the banks in Iraq in the gray area or the black area of potentially high risk payments,
Yeah.
and this is a challenge for the end consumer. And if you dig deeper into this and why this is happening, it's primarily because not a lot of there isn't a lot of identity theft protection laws in Iraq or prosecution in Iraq. At Pure Platform, we've seen these issues where we knew who the person that stole whose identity, and we could even report it to the police so with evidence because the police said I don't even know where to start on in prosecuting this case or investigating this case. So this is a challenge
Uh,
for the whole industry as a whole. Now another area that I always talk about is the lack of funding as well. Now I always tell entrepreneurs in Iraq, you don't need to have $1 million on your desk before you start implementing your idea. No one does, no one has in the past.
yeah.
Everybody struggled with this before they got funded. But generally speaking, I've probably met every investor that there is in Iraq outside of the traditional investment in real estate and so on. And the I say there is a big a high level of immaturity in terms of identifying opportunities, evaluating companies in areas outside of traditional or classical investment areas such as real estate.
Mm,
I've seen more maturity, surprisingly, in UAE, and even more maturity in Saudi Arabia. For example, when I traveled, a lot of interest or desire to invest in companies in this area. But generally
yeah.
speaking, you don't have this type of appetite in Iraq, and you don't have interest foreign investors in Iraq. And I've asked a lot of investors from outside of Iraq why wouldn't they invest in Iraq, and general answer is I don't even know where to start to protect my assets. I don't know how to protect myself. Not from physical security only, but from fund security. Is there a proper process? Is there a law? Is there are there rules that would protect my IP, intellectual property, copyrights, and things like that? Can I sue who steals information from me or data, or violates my confidentiality and so on? you know this limits access from international investors tremendously, and that provides a difficult environment for younger entrepreneurs in this environment. Now, other factors you may think about. A controversial topic I usually talk about in Iraq, which is the lack of skills.
Mm-hmm.
people skills or technology skills in Iraq. Now, this has nothing to do with the intelligence of the Iraqi worker. This has all to do with the expertise or experience working through some of these bigger problems. And a pure platform, for example, although we're 100% Iraqi resource based, worker based, even outside of Iraq, Iraqi employees are working for the company. But we rely heavily on internal training and internal career progression and development. We don't rely on someone that comes in with a rich resume or CV and hire them in the respective position. So these are some of the challenges that I've seen, generally speaking. Lastly, I would mention before I forget is the deficit of lack of trust. Like in this field in fintech, usually in every country, a company has to establish trust with the end consumer, so the
Yeah.
consumer will trust it to give it money, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Even buy something up front, and
Yeah.
that's a
Exactly.
challenge because in every country you start with a neutral level of lack of trust or trust, and then you build from there on. In Iraq, you almost start with a deficit, so you're guilty until proven
Oh.
innocent.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh, Especially with the model that we have established at a pure platform, which is 100% payment upfront, because we wanted to provide the best service at the lowest price to the end consumer. And that's how you would do it. That's the standard approach. It took some time to build some credibility, but now we have a lot of customers, who trust us, and they pay upfront before receiving the products. These are generally the challenges that I've seen in Iraq that I wouldn't say prevent the progression for fintech companies to spark progress and innovate. But I would say they put hurdles along the way, make it a little bit harder to progress under normal circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. Even myself as a user, when I need some time to get to a point when I actually trust a service that a company provides for me, and then uh, actually use that service or buy their product or whatever service that they are providing. Which definitely this can be one of the main uh, challenges that a fintech startup might face in Iraq, and also in any other countries, especially in Iraq, because like you mentioned that we are really have mistrust in people to companies. So until you reach to a point that you actually attract customers and you attract people that actually trust what you are providing for them as a service, it will take some time and you will face many hurdles. And also, thank you for sharing us or sharing with us this idea, and also the possible solution for it, what might be. Okay, so now we are fond of the challenges that we may face, especially in a place with like Iraq, and also the fintech that entrepreneurs can face when they want to innovate in it. Which areas of fintech in Iraq, in from your experience, do show promise for innovation and disruption as well?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned a bit earlier, and looking at Africa as a model, where they always say um, the need is the mother of all innovation, or something like this. I forgot the
Yeah,
exact, but
yeah,
rephrased or paraphrased. When you need something, you look for innovative solutions, or around the actual solution that's not available because of the infrastructural challenges. I would say some of the biggest areas that have seen improvement in Iraq, and they've seen a lot of reception by end consumers, specifically speaking, mobile payments as well as wallet payments. So wallets or digital wallets are usually
yeah,
like one app you use to bank. It's almost like a mobile bank. Mobile wallets is the ability to pay using your mobile, like Apple Pay, Google Pay, and so on. These two kind of like overcome some of the challenges that are presented because of the lack of banking services. Other areas that I think are starting to show some not progress but promise is the area of super apps. And now the concept of super apps usually does not exist primarily in the West, US and Europe, due to privacy constraints. Just because I provide my information to company A, I don't want to go to company B, and all of a sudden they know a lot of things about me from company A. And that's what super
Yeah.
apps usually offer, a fully integrated single identity, single management of profile, and so on, behavior of the customer. But there is an explosion of super apps in Asia, particularly. And I'm starting to see in the market in Iraq a big push for creating a lot of these super apps. I remember a few years ago, I spoke to the general manager of Kareem, I think 2 years ago, and he was telling me about they wanted to introduce the concept of super apps in Iraq. I'm not sure if they succeeded or not. I mean, it took a couple of years for them to build it. I'm not sure if eventually they ended up building it in the last few months or not. But the reason why this concept of super apps is very attractive in a country like Iraq is because you're trying to install value, and you're trying to install confidence in the end, in your end consumers. So basically, for me to convince
Yeah.
customers to use my mobile payment method, or my wallet, for example. I'm not a big bank. I don't have all these billions of dollars in assets. I'm not a big name brand. I don't have all these flashy licenses from the CBI, but I
Yeah.
am a small wallet operator, and I would like to convince customers to trust me, to believe in me, where there isn't a lot of trust. I mean, I don't know what the equivalence of the FDIC in Iraq is. I think it's something. I think it was like CGC or something that was established by CBI to protect consumers. But it has a very non-effective, ineffective role in Iraq to protect the customers' deposits, for example, and money and assets in general. So I think super apps can be attractive because they provide value for the end consumer. So hey, you may not know me, you may not trust me, you may not have know a lot about my services, but here I offer a lot of the things that you use on a daily basis,
Yeah.
from ride hailing to digital cards to shopping online to maybe transportation, to all kinds of different services that you can have all embedded in one app. All are building, for the sake of building a bait, basically for the end consumer to start trusting this platform and start spending their money digitally. So this
Yeah.
concept generally succeeds in Africa, in Asia, and I think Iraq is no exception for this. Another area that I see a huge opportunity is the peer-to-peer funding, lending.
Mm.
One of the challenges that we talked about earlier is the lack of funding in Iraq, generally
Yeah.
speaking, from funding institutions such as VCs and angel investment groups and so on. And this creates a need for peer-to-peer lending. Now, this started to become more of not only peer-to-peer, but also company-to-peer, more in the private sector. So you have services that offer payment installments right now pegged against salaries, government salaries. um, uh, Outside of the traditional, you have to give me your house deed or something, or your car, in order for me to give you $1,000 in loan. Now all of a sudden you can do it pegged against your salary. So we're starting to see a lot more of this, and I think this is gonna be more prominent or prevalent in the market in the next year or two. Lastly, I think there's tremendous opportunity in the digital identity field, or like biometrics, other forms of verification. In the, with the lack of ability to rely on the law and regulations to help you with the identity, theft fighting, or
Mm. Yeah.
limiting. You have to rely on innovative solutions to eliminate this from the beginning. How do you eliminate identity theft? You try to rely on biometrics and other technologies, innovative technologies, to reduce as much as you can. Obviously, you cannot eliminate 100%, but to reduce tremendously high risk payments, for example. So these are all areas that I
Uh,
see having the biggest potential for growth and opportunities for fintech startups.
yeah. Thank you so much for all of this insight. I mean, even we have live examples for super apps in Iraq, and also with it e-wallets and also digital wallets that we have, especially because yeah, they have a lot of exposure of users inside of Iraq. They're using it for almost everyday transaction. For example, the e-wallets. They save their money in there. Most of the incomes are actually coming for the e-wallets, especially with if you are, let's say, an online freelancer, or even if you have a small business. Like how you get your payment is with the e-wallet system. And also regarding the super apps, that we have some super apps in Iraq that are already functioning at the moment. Um, Inside the Kara region, outside of Kara region as well, in like generally in Iraq, in terms of food delivery, grocery delivery, and also they have integrated their payment. For example, uh, the payment for the grocery that you pay. If there was any payment left for the delivery guy to actually give you any change, instead of that, you can keep it inside of your digital wallet of the super app, and then you can spend it afterwards. Which is, yeah, good. And also the other insight that you mentioned, which is the identity theft prevention as well. From all of the digitalization that Iraq is going through at the moment, that would be one of the key assets to add actually to the Iraqi technology and fintech business as well, instead of relying only on regulatory laws and government laws as well. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Now, I want to know, because just like we said that technology, Iraq is going through a technology phase at the moment. How has technology-driven financial innovation improved financial inclusion in Iraq?
Um, okay, it's giving me a warning about the stream. Can you still hear me and see me? Okay, it's kind of
Yeah, yeah,
moment.
yeah,
Okay, momentarily disrupted my
yeah,
connection. Anyways, so we talked about so financial inclusion in general. It arises from the lack of usually financial uh, what would you say, viable financial services, as well as viable banking services. When these are lacking in a country or an economy, usually other things rise, such as mobile payments, wallet payments, like
yeah.
we said, and these are the ones that increased access for the to remote populations, or populations that don't have access to these, in Iraq would be fancy services.
Mhm.
Um, um, uh, you know, the other technologies that helped tremendously in this area would be something that I've seen a lot in cash-based economies, which is what is usually referred to as the bill payment. Bill payment, it's available now. I believe most payment providers offer the service. If
Yeah.
you, for some reason, don't have access to a mobile wallet, or maybe don't even have a smartphone, you don't have access to internet, for example,
Mhm.
you can always be given a bill number. For example, if it's offered by a certain payment provider, and you go to that agent that offers the services of this provider, and then
Mhm.
you give them the payment, the bill number, and then you can pay it. Usually, these branches are available everywhere in Iraq. That's where you have, for example, Key Card, Asia Pay, Zain Cash and others, they have their agents, in the thousands across the country, and
Yeah.
you can, walk into any one of them and pay a bill. Now, usually with this type of payment, you don't even need to be KYC'd, because you are paying the actual recipient, and that recipient is actually KYC'd, and they have the actual bill presented with the details of the invoice. Thus, the law does not require the payer to provide such documentation. So this makes it very easy and very simple for the common person, no matter how far in the in villages or remote towns they are. They can actually walk over to the next key card agent, for example, agent, method or agent, and then they pay with a bill. They can pay anybody in the country with a small fee. I think the fee is minimal, maybe like I think it was 0.5% or something like that, and that's typically the fee for this type of payment in Iraq. But that has increased access as well. Now, access to credit and lending, I still hear a lot of things in Iraq about increased access to lending, but I haven't really seen. I've been talking to a lot of startup companies, a lot of entrepreneurs. I haven't seen money available or funding available to startup companies like I've seen in UAE, for example, in Saudi Arabia and other countries, and definitely in the U.S. In the U.S., money is readily available. But because of the lack of such funding from actual institutions, funding institutions, you started to see some innovation in the space of peer-to-peer lending, but as well as peer-to-peer. There's an unofficial lending or payment method, which is if you're probably familiar with. PUBG or other gaming gamers, right? That play those games online. Usually, their favorite forms of payment could be just transferring credits, mobile minutes credits or vouchers, right?
Yeah.
So I give you
Mhm.
5,000 whatever from Asia Cell in exchange for give me this many points in the game. So this has
Yeah.
introduced new methods of innovation to pay for some of these services without having access, easy access or feasible access to some of these banking or institutional vendor lenders or providers of these services. Lastly, the concept of identity is such an important concept, especially in fintech. It requires complete competency in this field in order for the fintech field to flourish. You need to uniquely identify a customer. Now, in other countries, you rely on unique identifiers, unique numbers. Like in the US, you have a social security number
Mhm.
that is issued at birth to every person, every citizen, and that uniquely identifies the person. You couple this with some, OTP, some verification, some secret questions, and so on, and that's it. You can get by. In a country like Iraq, you don't have access to these types of services, and you don't have access to even biometrics, which are heavily organizations heavily rely on them, or governments rely on them in the
Yeah.
region. Like in UAE, there is UAE Pass that is shared, that you can use across all banks using your biometrics that you obtain at residency and so on. In Iraq, you can see a lot of the providers, payment providers, issuers, acquirers are starting to build proprietary solutions for biometrics. I think KiCad innovated this field years ago, but it's still not readily available as a service to other fintech companies. I'm a fintech company. I'm trying, I want to use biometrics as a service. So first, I don't have national ID integration yet, so I can verify Mohammed's ID, number, whether it's accurate or not. On the other hand, I don't
Yeah.
have a database publicly available, readily available, even through zero knowledge access. I don't need to have all the details about the customer, but just to verify their access and their identity, you don't have this readily available. So these are all technology driven innovations that could improve more access for remote communities for complete financial inclusion.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, of course. I mean, in terms of lending, like these terms, sending credits, for example, let's say sending mobile credits to someone, and then they give in exchange they will give you some game credit, or even some you can say some gift card, probably Apple gift card or Google gift card. Most of the people actually buying them in this way, which is can lead to a more cashless transaction between two people, or like you mentioned, a peer-to-peer lending can happen here. um uh Iraq has been seeing improvement in that, but in terms of identity, yeah, of course we need that. Iraq, uh, um, in a country like Iraq, it still needs some to take some more steps forward to actually achieve a good and a safe environment for people to do the transaction without fearing their identity to be stolen, or even uh, fearing for their money transaction securities as well. Okay, I will send that money, or someone will lend me that money. Will that money will get to me safely, or where does it go? So, in order to make that kind of a feeling inside in our users, in the users of fintech services, I still need some steps forward, just like you mentioned, of course. Now, I want to know, because we still have really a lot of traditional financial institutions in Iraq that provide financial services for them. How will traditional financial institutions collaborate with fintech startups in Iraq?
How well or how can?
Or,
Because these are
oh,
two
yeah,
yeah, these are two different. I can answer. I try to answer both. Um, um, let's start with how can.
yeah,
Obviously, how can does not imply that they will, right? Uh,
yeah,
in other countries, there is big, big uh, interchange of or exchange of technologies and innovation, usually through incubators between bigger institutions, whether in fintech or other areas as well, and between significant players in the market, and between early startups. So they have things like they call them labs, either medical lab or to test like a blockchain implementation and so on. You have like JP Morgan bank, a large bank, working with startup companies. Hey, innovate, cross-border settlement, for example, make it secure, make it
hmm,
transparent, make it scalable. So you have this
yeah,
traditional collaborative effort between younger entrepreneurs and bigger institutions. You also have a similar type of collaboration between bigger institutions or organizations and as with and academia or academic institutions as well, and
yeah,
which are incubators in themselves, or themselves they are incubators for next generation genesis of new ideas or fintech companies and so on. Like for example,
hmm,
ChatGPT.
yeah,
GPT came as a collaboration, a result of collaborative effort between Google and some universities in the U.S. And then that led to starting a company called OpenAI, and OpenAI became provided the solution, ChatGPT, and that became a big terminology or keyword that is exchanged around nowadays. Um, Now they can also do partnerships with the younger fintech or smaller fintech companies, trying out or experimenting with different models. Hey, here's the space of customers or domain of services that I offer, or maybe this region or this specific problem. Let's try to solve it. You solve it. I'll pour in the money, resources, expertise, and anything you need. But I don't have the time to solve it. You solve it, and let's work together collaboratively on it. That's another area where traditionally bigger institutions work with smaller ones or smaller fintech startups to advance. their agenda. Now, other areas that I've seen in other countries, more mature countries or markets where you have digital banking, you have the next generation of digital banking, which is open banking. Open banking is about the bank offering the core digital bank functionality and then opening the infrastructure or the platform to the market and wait for smaller fintech companies to come and innovate solutions that are plug and
Mm.
play into this infrastructure. But at the end of the day, it enriches the platform and makes it more interesting and more attractive to end consumers. So I put the infrastructure, the framework, I put it out there, and I expect others to innovate, plug in with mine. This is called open banking. So these are typically areas where you see collaboration between small and big fintechs. I've also seen just yesterday, or not yesterday, I think it was a week ago, sorry, where you saw Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, testifying in front of
Yeah.
Congress in the U.S., pushing for regulation on AI, AI, or obtaining. He's pushing for the concept of obtaining a license or having to obtain a license before you train a specific set of data on for a certain purpose. Once you get the license, now the government or the regulatory body that issues the license now will have more, governance over what you're trying to do in case you try to do something bad, right? That hurts the
Yeah.
population, that starts wars and other things as well. Now, Sam Altman is obviously is a startup company. Maybe you can think of it as no longer a startup with the big funding that they received from Microsoft, but obviously has the bigger companies behind it, like Microsoft, pushing them and helping them push their regulatory agenda across. So these are typical, because the smaller player in the markets don't make changes in regulations. They rely on bigger players to collaborate with
Yeah.
them and help them push some of this agenda, in
Hmm.
which it helps everybody, right? So this is how
Yeah.
how to answer how can a bigger financial institution collaborate or work with a fintech, a smaller fintech. Now, how well in Iraq, it's hard to say. It depends on the appetite. Like I said, I haven't seen a very aggressive appetite for investment in such technologies like fintech, health tech, e-commerce, and other areas because of the lack of I guess the proper market valuation methodologies to evaluate the company properly, what it needs to be, or position it properly. You can always evaluate the house value, easily. You get a real estate. Anybody in Iraq, any real estate can give you the value of the home, but not a lot of people can value a company based on IP and copyright and other assetless or intangible assets that you cannot feel yourself. So how
Yeah.
will I think potentially maybe acquisition will be the primary driver of this collaboration. When
Yeah.
bigger 800 pound gorillas in the room, big elephants, they cannot move anymore. They cannot move fast enough like they used to back in the younger years, right? A younger age. Now
Yeah.
they are forced to acquire younger startups, younger fintech companies to provide additional services they themselves could not have offered. Not even if they poured in millions of dollars, a lot of resources. It just takes forever to organize, orchestrate all the effort amongst all the teams and invest money and so on. And there's always a lot of ideas. It makes it hard to focus on one single idea, and that's what makes younger fintech startups or entrepreneurial mindsets in these younger people makes them more attractive to these bigger companies. So I think, generally speaking, how will they collaborate or work together with smaller fintech companies? I think it's not going to be based on collaboration or integration or partnerships. It's going to be primarily based on actual straight up acquisition.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, for for the bigger companies and the bigger institutions at the moment, if they want to integrate certain servers or certain product that they have, and they want to provide it because of other big institutions, and also the like the challenges they face with each other. They need to like work with or give space to smaller fintech businesses for them for this, so they can actually work on that specific um, service that they have in mind, but they cannot implement it themselves because of how other uh, institutions are working, and also opposing them, opposing to them, to give them they have to give other uh, smaller businesses and fintech, so they can actually have that service in the market. Uh, Thank you so much for that. Now, that will get me to my next question. Uh, Simply, how can fintech actually support SMEs in growth in Iraq?
Um, so this is related to the previous question, or maybe in general talking about. Are you referring to like fintech technology as a technology, or are you talking about institutions or financial institutions in this space?
Uh, i yeah, fintech as a technology.
Okay.
How can it help small and medium-sized enterprises in Iraq,
Yeah.
like make them grow?
Sure. One of the biggest challenges in Iraq, in this field, in this sector, is payment. Obviously,
Hmm.
that's one of the
Yeah.
biggest issues. How can I offer various payment options to my customers, and they're streamlined, they're fully integrated with my services and products that I'm offering, that provide different ways for different customers to pay, no matter what part of the country they are, if they have smartphones, if they don't have smartphones, if they're KYC'd, if they're not KYC'd, and so on. So payment streamlining, payment services, gateways, I think this will help tremendously. I think there was I was reading today earlier. There was a government. I forgot which one. Could have been Nigeria or Egypt. One of these companies that countries that have gone through a big transformation in this field. They were uh, 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 they did not even wait for the private sector to innovate because it was too slow. They started to acquire companies, not actual acquisition, but to acquire services of companies, whether international or local, to build some of these APIs and offer them as APIs or SDKs for companies to integrate with and expedite progress in the country. So hey, if I'm waiting too long for the private sector to innovate, maybe I should inject some of the innovation now. As a person that came from the U.S., 100% capitalist country, I don't encourage this type of obviously approach. You should rely on the private sector, but if the private sector is too slow to move, then maybe you need to have some of these offered to spark some of this progress. Now, so payment is a primary challenge in Iraq. We talked about access to financing and funding in general. Every
Hmm.
country I've been to, there's
Yeah.
a form of funding uh, uh, that does not necessarily need to be attached to you owning a home and kind of like writing off your entire house or your car in order to get funding. There are many credit-based funding, maybe equity sharing based funding. There's revenue-based funding, revenue sharing-based funding, where the financial institution uh, get access to your revenue on an ongoing basis and acquire a percentage of it. So there are many different models for funding. One of the largest fintech companies in the world, the fastest growing at some point. And now there are many companies that surpassed it. It's called Brex in the US, that was 100% positioned around providing funding for smaller startup companies, small and medium-sized enterprises. Providing access to funding is tremendous and important. Now, someone told me the other day, well, if CBI opens funding for early stage startups or small or medium sized enterprises, most of the time this money is wasted, it's lost. How do you control impact of it? Is it really helping? Is it not helping? Well, there are many measures. So my answers to him was, and I'm mentioning this here, there are many ways to kind of measure and govern this process. But usually in countries like the US, for example, there's always small business. There's small business administration even, and they usually offer different types of loans to US based companies that are based, and the funding is actually based on the size of the company. So the more you hire, the more people you hire, the more talented people you hire, the more funding you get. So they attach it to how significant of an impact you leave on the economy. If you're expanding very quickly, if you're hiring more people, if you're bringing in more revenue, if you're touching more lives, more businesses, and so on, then you get more funding. And in a lot of cases, the government actually waives off the funding. So waves off the debt that is usually that rises from the funding. So usually these things are loans. So you get, let's say, for example, access to $25,000 per employee that you've hired, and then it's a loan that you have to pay back. But if you maintained this employment for 3 years or 4 years or whatever, then they waive off this loan because they see that you're sustainable. You're doing a lot with the money that you receive. So we need to establish a similar model in Iraq to ensure that the funding that's coming out of CBI, and it has a huge reserve. I think the other day I was reading it had over $100 billion in reserves, and that's, I think, about 20 months in advance of what they call import impact factor, which is basically for the next 20 months we are fully covered in terms of imports that we have to pay for without any additional revenue or new revenue. So that's a lot of months. You can start, pulling in some of the money and investing in the private sector and injecting companies in a similar model like the US is doing in terms of encouraging hiring and so on. Abu Dhabi, for example, they offer similar investment programs for companies that would bring their programmers from outside of the country into Abu Dhabi. So as long as you hire programmers inside Abu Dhabi, you get access to funding. In Jordan, they have a similar model where you get your technology employees. And this information is from a couple of years ago. I don't know if they're still doing it, but it was they reached out to us and they said hire Jordanians as programmers, and the first 6 months or 9 months will be paid completely by the government, by the program initiative that they have. So they're trying to encourage the hiring of Jordanians. So there are many programs like this, and that's how you can spark this sector, private sector, and have it innovate. Um, Other than that, just traditional, like the things like we talked about, the open banking and other areas, and allowing companies to obtain licenses much easier, and so on. But these are smaller compared to the first two factors that I mentioned.
Yeah, uh, I mean, all of these factors, like uh, g- getting access to funding more easily, and also the payment process between a business and also the end consumer that gets the service or the product from the business or from the enterprise. It really encourages people to even like start and also innovate in the fintech sector in Iraq as well. So we can see more growth in fintech in the future. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Now we'll get to know Pure Platform more and more for more upcoming questions. I want to
Now
know,
you got me more excited
yeah, yeah.
than.
I want to know what inspired Pure Platform's course regional e-commerce and fintech integration that they have.
Um, This is a multifaceted question. It could mean different things, but I'll take it what I think it means, because it makes more sense to me and it's easier to answer. Um,
Yeah, of course.
Pure Platform. When I first started Pure Platform, the focus was how to build a sustainable business where you have the IP centered in the middle, and licensing out Pure Platform, the operational model in different countries, so it becomes cross region. There's a lot that's coming out shortly. I mean, I've announced in my last live that Pure Platform is about to open in Saudi Arabia. We just opened in Saudi Arabia, so there is Pure
Oh,
Platform Saudi Arabia. Uh,
congratulations.
Thank you. So pureplatform.sa, and it's still in pilot in terms of we haven't publicized it, we haven't advertised it yet, but we have local partners and local investors in Saudi Arabia. We're about to launch UAE. We wanted to finalize the Saudi Arabian market before we launch UAE. So we're about to launch UAE next. And after that, hopefully, we'll continue the rolling, the dominoes continue to roll. Will continue to fall in our favor. This is in terms of expansion cross regionally, and the idea was it's actually multi-purpose. One, how do we provide a very highly efficient technology that give local customers access to goods and services that are offered outside the country in a way where they feel that they're buying from a local market or a local business. To encourage this, you obviously need to have partnerships and warehouses in as many countries as possible. But then, if you,
Mhm.
and establishing entities in those countries means also establishing the app and having customers have access to it. This is multi-dimensional. It's a two-way or two-lane highway. This gives Iraq access, or Iraqis access to exclusive offers from Saudi Arabia, and equally as well, giving Saudis access to Iraqi products and services offered. So
Oh,
this, as you add more countries and as we expand into more regions, this provides for an explosive or exponentially growing network of interconnected countries or vendors at a smaller scale, where customers will have a tremendous a big network, a humongous network of opportunities and
mhm.
options that they can dig into and buy products or services where they see fit, no matter where they come from. This was the original vision, and this continues to be the vision. And now we're finally think that this year in 2023, we feel like we've passed the proof of concept at the early stage concept, not only proof, but creating elasticity for the business, creating a scalable model, creating a highly profitable model that's self-sustaining, which is a very difficult thing to do in a country like Iraq, where a lot of startup companies cannot even get to the break-even point for in terms of profits and losses. um, because we feel like we've mastered the stage. We feel like expansion, cross regionally and then maybe even globally afterwards, is the natural thing to do afterwards, especially where we'll rely heavily on technology. So 95% of our spend is on technology. Our technologies are, like I said, Iraqis, primarily Iraqi Americans and Iraqis in Iraq, and we're expanding in the region as well. Now, as we open in more countries, we may acquire local talents as well, but we started in Iraq. Um, so that really is, what the initial original thought was about, and inspired our direction and path to cross border, cross region expansion.
Yeah, great. Actually, it really sounds interesting. Like all of it. For example, me as a user from Iraq, I can get products from other regions as well, as easily and as affordable as possible, whether it's from KSA or from UAE, like you mentioned, and also the fintech integration of it as well. That we will get into that more, but it really helps like the customer to get to not just get the product out of it, but also gets something else out of it, which is the fintech integration. Now, I want to know, how does the Kirus token, which is the fintech integration inside of Pure Platform, benefits Pure Platform customers?
Yeah, the keto is a whole ecosystem on its own. Like, it's a whole closed economy that has a lot of traits and features that could benefit
Yeah.
customers.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, a lot of these features are hidden because they are borderline, gray area in Iraq because of the limitation of the central bank, regulations and rules in Iraq. Not that because not pointing to it as a cryptocurrency or a currency in general. I'm not talking about this because it's not. I'm talking about some features and traits that we wanted to expand the keto into, and unfortunately, we'll have a better opportunity to do that in Saudi Arabia and UAE, where customers there are going to enjoy a lot of the benefits. I'm a complete believer in democratization and profit sharing, and
Hmm.
we want to carry this model into the into the profit pool of Pure Platform. And
Yeah.
like I said, this is not. It's impossible to do today with Iraq's regulations. Now, how does it benefit Iraqis in Iraq? Keto is a closed system, which means once you buy a keto, you cannot cash it out. That's not the purpose for the keto. It's like any other reward program, except the purpose of the keto system is to build the world's largest reward program or network. Um, when you fly
Hmm.
with the Emirates, when you fly with any other airlines, you get access to frequent flyer programs, reward programs, or when you get your Visa or Mastercard, you get your rewards on every transaction you make, and you use these points. Sometimes you buy more points to top the points that you have, and that's how you can buy kilos as well. So you can buy more
Yeah.
points, top the points that you have to buy something more reasonable, or make that makes sense. If you're growing these points very slowly, right? I mean, come on, I cannot travel 10 times a day in order to afford an upgrade of $60
Yeah.
on the next flight.
Hmm.
So it's not feasible. Now, the challenge with these reward programs or models that the keto system had fixed is that the reward programs typically all of them follow the same formula, the same equation, mathematical equation, which is the value of the points that I give must be less than the pure profit that I make per transaction. So I'm a third party. I'm imposing a payment friction fee, right? So I'm a
Hmm.
credit card payment gateway, and I'm offering the service in exchange for 2.5% fee, transaction fee. Now,
Yeah.
for me to give rewards for every transaction that the customer does, uh, I must be making more money than I'm giving. So I cannot give points that have the same value or more than the money that I'm making out of the 2.5%. Now, the 2.5%, 2% goes to the central bank, MDR. It's called MDR now. I think they lowered it to 1%, maybe even lower, to encourage digital payments. Some of it will go to MasterCard or Visa, and part of it will go to for the payment gateway locally. I'm talking about Iraq. So
Hmm.
now my profit has to be, my profit could be 0.75% per transaction. I cannot give points that are more than that. It has to be significantly lower, because at this margin, 0.75%, I may be still not profitable. I still have to pay salaries, rent, and stuff like that, R&D, and so on.
Hmm.
So I may end up being able to give only 0.01% or 0.1%. Now, there are many tricks that
Oh.
companies do, which is where they give you more, but those tricks usually include short-term rewards. So in the US, they may give you 5% for transactions, but then up to $20,000 or $10,000, and then after that you go back to the normal rate. Or sometimes they even based on their analysis or data analytics, they rely on not every customer is going to use their points and they're going to expire. So they try to put them mathematically in a way where you cannot accumulate large number where you can hurt them, and they assume a percentage of it is going to expire or you're not going to use it at all. And then they assume that this is recovered loss, right? So
Mm-hmm.
effectively, they can get
Yeah.
2%, 3%, but not everybody's going to be using 2, 3%. Only a small portion of the population, and only for a small portion of the transactions that they make. So by definition, if you are getting a reward point for any program, any payment, or any type of third-party service provider, then know that you're actually getting hurt by it, not benefited, because you would not have received this money unless you had paid more than that, right? To a third party.
Yeah.
That is not a primary factor of the transaction. They're just a processor or someone in between. Now, the Kido is different. The Kido does not have a third-party processor. It's frictionless, so that if I send you Kidos or if I pay you in Kidos, it's 100% frictionless. It doesn't reduce the value in the transaction. There's no
Mm.
transaction fees. And the Kido value is usually embedded in the discounts that or the acquisition cost that the vendor is willing to give up. So the vendor is willing to give up 10% of the value of the merchandise because it's a substitute for acquisition cost of the customer and all other fees, advertisement fees, and so on. And they're given straight to the customer. So in this case, the customer gets loyalty of 10%, 20%, 30%, depending on the loyalty that the vendor is willing to give or the seller is willing to give. All of a sudden, you're breaking out of the equation that's normal, and normally is under 1% or 2%, and it expires and it's very aggressive, and you're paying a lot more than you're actually getting. You're getting to something where you're actually not paying anything. You're just paying the cost of the product, whether you get the reward points or not. You're paying the exact same amount. But if you do it through the system and you get Kidos, then you get reward points that are significantly more, 10%, 20%, 30%, depending on the profit margin that the customer, the seller is willing to give or give up in exchange for acquisition cost and all of that, because they've substituted all of this with a customer that came straight to them through the system. And
Mm.
that benefits the end customer significantly. And I gave previously several examples on this, where the price of a commodity can drop tremendously for the end consumer strictly by using the Kido system. Now, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, because Kido is pegged to the dollar, if you own 10 Kidos, you own $10 with us. Uh,
Yeah.
it's not money that you can withdraw. It's not money you can invest. It's strictly a value of the Kido. People who bought, who have Kidos in their wallets from months ago, they've seen tremendous increase in the value, purchasing power of the Kido, without having to worry about, okay, let me invest money in gold or anything else. They're just by having Kidos now, it's back to the actual currency of the international purchasing, right? You can buy with USD in UAE and other countries as well, not just the US. And that made it much
Yeah.
simpler for the end consumer not to be vulnerable because of the fluctuations in the prices and the changes in
Yeah.
currency value.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. I
the
mean,
limited power of the Kido ecosystem, how it benefits Iraqis. There's a lot more to
yeah.
it. Unfortunately, it's not yet
Uh,
available in Iraq.
yeah. Yeah. I know. I mean, because just like we mentioned, because of the regulation, which is one of the I can say one of the major challenges here in Iraq for all of the businesses, actually, for them to grow and for them to practice what they have in the region, across the country. Thank you so much for making that clear for our audience as well. What the power of ketos and what ketos can do, and also how you can Iraq and outside of Iraq, even if you do make a purchase, you can benefit from it. Now we talked about a lot. We mentioned the securing of identity of the users and also and all of that. Now, how does Pure Platform ensure user privacy while utilizing aggregated data for advertising?
So as of today, we don't use aggregated data for advertising as of today.
Yeah.
But we use a lot. We take customers' privacy and confidentiality with utmost importance. It's very, very, very important to us. I'll give you examples of what we do at Pure Platform. Although this concept is very new to Iraq, confidentiality and privacy, we've been doing it from 2019 in Iraq, while a lot of companies, maybe up until today, still don't do this, right? So one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that we do is we rely on is what we call differential privacy. Differential privacy is our internal algorithms that allow us to strip off any sensitive data 100% prior to doing anything else with it, such as processing the data, such as we don't share any data, we don't sell any data, by the way. But
Mm-hmm.
to make it, for example, in the app today, it tells you what most customers like you would buy and things like that. This is not.
Yeah.
This is aggregated data based on differential privacy analysis. Differential privacy means whether Muhammad's data, specifically Muhammad's data, is part of this analysis process, or it's not. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change significantly. Change the margin of error on the results or the conclusion that we get out of this analysis model. So
Mm-hmm.
Muhammad's data, whether it's there or not, it doesn't matter. This is called differential privacy. Apple has popularized this technology or this approach or the algorithm, security algorithm, with their iPhones. So they don't know their data, they don't know who you are, but they can actually process your data without including the essential data or the sensitive data to analyze and provide all the recommendations and things that you see, the cool things that you see in the app or on the phone. We
Yeah.
also rely on triple encryption. Our data is encrypted at storage, encrypted at motion, and encrypted at access as well. We really rely on something called least privilege access. This concept, I'm used to it in the US. We have to do it. It's kind of like it's part of life in Iraq. It's well, I personally faced a lot of challenges, especially with managers in the company early on, where you remove accesses of managers, and they say, "Why'd you remove my access?" And I say, "Because you don't need this access." And this is the challenge. It was the challenge internally, but then all of the employees have been educated on it with time. To give you an examples of how this is effectively implemented, I'm the CEO, the founder, the investor in the company, and I don't have access to issuing any keydos to any customer. I cannot sell any
Mm-hmm.
keydos. I don't have any keydos. I think I have maybe 15 or 20 keydos that I bought. I
Yeah.
can use when I come to Iraq to add minutes to my phone service, because you can buy digital vouchers and so on. So we rely heavily on this. We also implement the concept even for our employees. We implement the concept of least access privilege or authorization. So, for example, our customer support, they will never have access to a full list of customers in front of them as they browse looking for the one that they're looking for, because that's violating the privacy and confidentiality of all the customers that they're looking at, even if they don't intend to look at them, even if they're not
Mm-hmm.
looking at them with bad intention. Someone behind their
Yeah.
back could be overlooking their shoulders. They can go to the bathroom, forget to lock their screen. All of a sudden, someone can take a picture, and they have access to a lot of customers. We don't do that. In all of our pages, you have to specifically search for the specific customer at hand. So the customer that gave you their information, you search for it, and then that one record shows up, and you click on it, and you have access to details as authorized by the customer themselves. Otherwise, you don't have access to it. So we,
Yeah.
we we implement this heavily. I noticed from working with a lot of financial institutions and banks in Iraq, they don't do that. So you walk in, someone pulls the list of all customers in front of them, and you can see phone numbers, names, and account numbers and stuff like that. We don't do that at all.
Oh.
Also, someone reached out to me. Another thing that we do, someone reached out to me today about an issue that faced some customers in some payment provider company that we deal with, and they said there are overcharges, many transactions that the customer has not authorized, have shown in their transcript or their statements. And they reached out to us and they said, what's going on? Why are you over, charging them more than usual or accepted? And my response to them was, it's impossible. We don't do that. We can't do that. Not even if we wanted to. If we wanted to be bad people, we can't actually do that because we don't store any payment information. And that's very obvious because OTPs are generated when the customer comes to our website and try to buy something or our app. We don't store any private information about the customer as it relates to payments. We don't ask them any private questions about, we don't ask them for OTP information in our app. We always send them to the payment gateway of their respective payment provider or gateway or issuer. And then we tell them, we send them there. They do their process. They do their OTP. They do their verification over there. And then they come back to us. A message comes back to us authorizing this payment, this specific payment for that customer as he or she authorized their bank to do that or to release the funds to Pure Platform. So Pure Platform, not even if we wanted to today, I cannot take Mohammed's card and buy more with it. I can't do that. I don't have access to his credit cards and other information as well. So we follow all these practices. And I remember we were under attack by untargeted attack and targeted attack. Targeted because there was an organization or some institution that tried to bring down our services from UAE, and then from Turkey, and then from Jordan. Whether it was coordinated or not, that's a different story. And integrity and data integrity and service integrity is an important part of customers' privacy, because not disclosing that information or allowing a third party to penetrate the system and have access to this information is vital for us. Internally, we have processes inside the company that prevents programmers who produce the code from accessing production data. So a programmer, no matter how senior they are in the company, they do not have production access to production data where they can actually read Muhammad's sensitive information or his phone number and so on, or past purchases or orders. Similarly, our DevOps, senior DevOps and so on, who have access to production to set up the environments and so on, they don't have access to SSH keys or production keys that encrypt the data. So they cannot have access to code or how the algorithm actually works beyond what they're allowed to in order to deploy the system. Also, as we expand into other regions like Saudi Arabia and UAE, we've implemented a model of data segregation. So services are offered to all countries equally, but there is never a mix of data. So the Saudi account, the Iraqi account, to each other, they act like they're separate companies, not just separate departments or separate servers. They're 100% separate companies, not having access to each other. And we did it in such a model where any authorization to data, sensitive data to any country, will be issued by the respective country to that respective user only for data that they have access to through interfaces and APIs. I apologize for being a little bit more technical about this, but these are ways that we have implemented the system to ensure data integrity, access integrity, and providing the proper authorization and authentication, all to surround the customer and protect the customer from any leak of data or information. We don't have any access to, we don't exchange any data or any information with the end customer over email or chat or anything that's related to sensitive information. Even for verification purposes, Amazon, for
Yeah.
example, would ask their customer for a full ID picture, uncensored, unblurred, and bank statements. When we ask our customers when we suspect a high-risk payment, we ask our customers for identity verification. We ask them for an ID, but we always tell them, make sure you blur everything on the ID except your name. We just want to see your name. Make sure that it matches the name on the credit card. So from the picture of the credit card and the picture of the ID, all I want to see is the name here, matches the name on the credit card and the last four digits of the credit card that you actually used. I don't care about the rest of the number. I don't want to see your CVC or your secret number. I don't want to know any information about you, your background, your other names that you go by, your address and things like that. I just need to make sure that you are the one who you say you are when you provided the payment, to ensure that there is no future disputes on the payment. So we
Yeah.
implement a lot of these practices to ensure the privacy and confidentiality. But we always tell the customer we will never, and we never did, we're not doing, and we never will sell any information that will be sensitive and uniquely, distinctly identifies a customer.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving that clarification that Pure Platform has a really strict privacy policy practices when it comes to their customers' data, and what was the customer is actually providing to them, and how you are actually keeping their data safe, and not sharing it, and also not you know getting advantage out of. Uh, Thank you for clarifying that. Now, as of my last question, we asked that to all of our entrepreneurs that we have on our Friday Life Factory sessions, just like that. What kind of advice do you have for aspiring fintech entrepreneurs based on your experience?
I speak at some universities in Iraq, and usually at incubators, like the station and others. And I always get asked this question, but to generalize the question to all entrepreneurial or entrepreneurs in various industries, not just fintech.
Hmm.
Generally, I repeat the same advice that I usually offer, and it's one. Uh, Number one, don't expect anyone to come to you and drop $1 million on your desk before you start your startup.
Hmm.
You always have, the burden is on you to prove your business, to prove that it's a viable business, to prove that it's a sustainable business
Yeah.
before you can seek funding. And there is always a misconception, especially in Iraq, about what the purpose of funding is. People think I should get access to funding so I can prove my concept or my business. But that's not what funding is for. Funding is never to prove a concept. Funding is actually to take a proven concept and scale it, right? So
Yeah.
and I always give this advice to small businesses and so on that I mentor in Iraq, and I say, just take one shop, take one business, take one company, take 10 customers, and try to do a proof of concept that works for them, and to the point where they actually sustainably and repeatedly use the same service and they pay for it. And what they are willing to pay, not on a promotion or a discount, what they are actually willing to pay covers your expenses and makes you profitable. Even if you make a
Hmm.
dollar profit or half a dollar or 10 cents, whatever, that's okay. Once you prove this concept that it's actually working, it's benefiting some end consumers or different parties involved in this transaction, the next step is to prove that if you have access to more funding, you can actually copy paste this and have, instead of having 10 customers, you can reach out to 100,000 customers. Instead of having access to 10 businesses, you can have access to 1,000 businesses, and so on. So this scalability comes from the additional funding, because you don't have that funding to scale your business more, and that's why you're willing to give part of your company away to this investor, because you
Hmm.
want to take your business to the next level. Owning
Yeah.
50% or say 60% of something much larger is better than owning 100% as much of a small bite, right?
Yeah.
So that's my advice to entrepreneurs who start businesses. Focus on starting the business and trying to get it to a break-even point where it's sustainable and feasible, even if on a small scale. Because some people say, well, to start the business, I need the money. No, you can do it on a much smaller scale. Keep making the scale smaller and smaller and smaller until you can actually afford to do it. And then there are many pro bono models you can use with people who can join you as co-founders. You can give them shares in the company. They're willing to provide the services that you need, from lawyers, from developers, from other expertise as well. So that's my number one
Yeah.
advice for Iraqis. And I always tell them that the environment in Iraq is ripe for entrepreneurship because of the size of the problems, the number of the problems. There are way too many problems in Iraq, but that's an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
This is
Mm-hmm.
this is
Of course.
the land of opportunity is Iraq, not the U.S. in terms of solving problems, because there are so many
Yeah.
problems, right? And as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, you should appreciate this and look for solutions. And this is a great time for Iraqis, young Iraqis, because things are stable. It's the start of foreign investors starting to come in. This is your window of a small window of opportunity to start something, to localize a business that only Iraqis know how to do, right? Very local to Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
solve a problem that exists in Iraq. And once you solve that problem and be very efficient at it, no matter how small you are, especially if it's technological solution like in fintech or health tech and so on, now, either a foreign investor will come in and acquire services, and now you can expand this way, or you can become a significant player very quickly. And then now you can establish either from your revenue or from other investors, you can actually expand and scale. But this is your opportunity before the foreign investors flood the market, and now you have competitions from Egyptians, from Jordanians, or from British, or from U.S. Americans, and from others, and so on, looking into the economy. I know there's a big
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
conference sponsored by the American Embassy coming up next month, where 6 or 7 innovative health tech companies in the U.S. will come and present in Iraq. And I'm mentoring and managing a startup like department in a big company to provide solutions that are built by Iraqis 100% to innovate. But
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, but the difference is our solution is going to be much better than the other solutions, coming from the US, because it localizes, it understands the market, understands the challenges, and
Exactly.
it provides a solution. So
Yeah.
my advice is take this
Yeah.
opportunity, take it to the next level. Don't wait for a better time. This is the better time. And it's not an easy path. It's very difficult. You have to be 100% committed. It takes a lot of challenges, and you have to take a lot of risks, and you will make a lot of mistakes, but this is part of the cycle. And yeah, if you don't fail, and I always say this, and a lot of people say that, I feel like it's a famous quote because of how true it is.
Yeah.
If you're not failing, you're not taking enough risks basically in your business, and you should
Yeah.
fail more often by taking more risks.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I mean, uh, just like you said, at the moment for Iraqi youth, for the youth community, it's really Iraq, like it's a lot of opportunities for them, because yeah, the youth see a lot of problems that I can say that the elderly got used to these problems. It's just, they are coped with them already. So now the youth are seeing these problems, and yeah, they have to see this problem as opportunities, like you mentioned, so they can innovate and find suitable solutions for them. So they can practice these solutions and providing them as a business for themselves. I agree with that 100%. Instead of just a foreign investor or foreign venture come from outside of Iraq and invest in it. I agree 100% with that. Thank you so much for all of your insight on the fintech, on uh, giving a good and solid background for our audience about Pure Platform and also the fintech in Iraq. Now we get to our last session, which is a Q&A with our audience. We've got a number of questions from our audience. I will on there now. One of the question is: it seems like Iraqis may need to use banks more in order to use credit cards, or am I wrong?
Um, and I'm gonna try to answer the question by first trying to rephrasing it. Um, uh, your main point or your main concern is obtaining a credit card or having access to credit cards. So you're asking, and correct me if I'm wrong. You're asking if I am to obtain a credit card, do I have to use a bank? Am I forced to use a bank? Is this kind of like a fact of life? Is it inevitable to use a bank in order to be able to use a card or issue a card? Typically speaking, credit cards are issued by financial institutions that are classified as issuers who have licenses to issue a credit card by the Central Bank of Iraq. Excuse me.
Mhm.
So you have a bunch of them in Iraq. You have, for example, you have Keycard, you have Switch, you have, these are institutions that are not necessarily banks, but they work with banks. The way it works, these institutions, through the license, issuance license, through working with an actual bank in Iraq, they partner with MasterCard or Visa, and they become a principal partner in Iraq, and they get access to a certain range of credit card numbers that they can issue in Iraq on behalf of Visa or MasterCard. And they have to wire in some money to hold their reserves at Visa and MasterCard in the US, all supported or orchestrated by bank relationships. So you need a bank. You need a bank in order to issue credit cards. Um, Now, if your concern is about digital payments, you don't need a credit card. As a matter of fact, in many countries, including the U.S., there's a huge push to cardless transactions, where you rely on your mobile. So I have my phone here, and every time I go, I can use it in UAE, I can use it in KSA. I cannot use it in Iraq like this. All I have to do is double click and immediately see my credit card, and I can, use NFC to pay with, right?
Mhm.
Now,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily need a credit card, to top up or pay through your mobile. You can actually use the concept of a wallet and other concepts. We talked about a bill. We talked about, that exists today in Iraq. All of these are gateways or pathways to payment methods. So you don't need a credit card in order to buy things online. You can use other methods. So, for example, many vendors nowadays, they use Apple Pay. Apple Pay, you can have a wallet. You don't need a credit card. And then with the Apple Pay, you can pay online. So there are many methods to do. But if you want to get a credit card today, then you should either go to a bank, the bank near you in Iraq, and get a credit card issued. Now, it's called a credit card, but it's not a credit card. There are no credit cards in Iraq. A credit card is a credit card. A credit means they allow you to spend it, and then you pay off the balance that you spend. So you don't need to put money before you spend the money. It's not prepaid. It's a debit card is prepaid. You put money in the bank, and you can use this money that you put in the bank up to the amount that you have in the bank. A credit card usually comes with a credit line. So you may have, let's say, $10,000 credit line, which means you can actually use up to $10,000. And when you reach your top of your balance, then you start paying it down, or you pay it fully, or you pay it monthly with interest imposed on your balance. But this is the way to obtain a credit card in Iraq. Or you can get it through financial institutions like Keycard or Switch or other companies like that. You can, they issue you this credit card, but behind the scenes, yes, they rely on the bank for it.
Yeah. Thank you for your input. We've got another question, which is generally about entrepreneurship. What is your opinion about the entrepreneurship in Iraq, and is it very hard?
So this is kind of like a continuation or maybe elaboration on the answer that I gave, and maybe the
Yeah.
gentleman or lady,
Yeah.
the lady asked the question before maybe I answered the previous question, but I'll add a couple. I'll take this opportunity to add a few more points. One time I spoke at a graduation ceremony in one of the universities in Iraq, and I was asked the question. Well, it wasn't a question; it was more of a sarcastic comment. Oh yeah, sure. You talk about entrepreneurship being easy, but well, not easy, but being doable or feasible. Because you come from the US, it's easy for you. In Iraq, it's much harder. It's non-existent. You cannot start the company in Iraq. And my
Yeah.
answer, a long answer, but I'm going to summarize it here. My answer to him was no. Looking at both countries, I think entrepreneurship is much easier in Iraq than it is in the US. And I gave examples of why that is. One, in the US, there's a lot more competition when you start a business. In Iraq, there's a lot less competition, especially when it comes to technology or specialized fields. When I started a company in California or in Chicago or other innovative states, immediately 10,000 companies are doing different variations of a similar idea and different derivatives of the same idea, and they're trying to compete. Some have more funding, some have less funding, some have more developers, some have less developers, some are luckier than me, will meet the right people, some will be less lucky. It's tremendous competition. So the first six startup companies that I started in the US, they were it was very incredibly challenging in to grow in a competitive environment. In Iraq, there's a lot less competition today in terms of technology. You start something that's very unique in technology, very innovative, a lot less competition. The second advantage for Iraqis over young Americans when it comes to entrepreneurship is that in America there's this societal or community stress or society stress or pressure on younger people to leave their home at a younger age. So at the age of 17, 18, they need to, they're not going to get kicked out, but it's usually the case that people leave their homes, rent their own apartments at the age of 17 or 18. It's usually in line with you going to college, and usually college is far away from home and you have to live away. So you rarely hear of someone living with their parents at the age of 20, 21, 25, 30, 35. That's almost non-existent. So now, as a young Americans, you are forced to provide for your own payment, for your own life, rent, food and everything at a much younger age. I had to pay for my own college in the US by working alongside going to school. So I had to work 20 hours a week, make enough money to pay for rent and other areas, including my education, and take some loans out that I later needed to pay. In Iraq, there's less pressure on the young population. And again, I'm generalizing, not to hurt the few individuals that don't fit this generalization, but generally speaking, it tends to be true. Um, a lot of Iraqis could continue to live with their parents until much later stage in their lives. I know people who are 45, 50 and still live alongside their family or parents and so on, and that's very acceptable in the community. Now you're saving rent, you're saving food, you're saving a lot of things, and you could actually focus on entrepreneurship. Now, the third advantage for Iraqis over Americans is that unemployment in the US is, I think it was like 1% or 2%, which means almost everyone in the US can get a job if they wanted to. That's not the case in Iraq. Not everyone who wants to get a job can get a job for various reasons. This
Yeah.
provides an opportunity, right? Opportunity cost for the American, because for them, like Mark Zuckerberg, for him to start Facebook, he needed to give up his job and his education so he can Harvard, so he can focus on Facebook and establish a company. Thousands of other people fail like him. He succeeded. Others will succeed. For everyone that succeeds, there's 1,000 that fail. In Iraq, unemployment rate is really high. You don't have access to jobs, so you don't have this opportunity cost of giving up your job in order to start a company. You're most likely are staying home with your family, or hanging out with your friends. So starting a business is actually undertaking less risk than an American youth would take. And by the way, the reason why I compared, and obviously there are more reasons that I mentioned. The reason I'm comparing U.S. and Iraq, this is not about favoritism. This is not about glorifying the U.S. and undermining Iraq. Not at all. On the contrary, I'm encouraging entrepreneurship in Iraq. I think there's tremendous opportunity for the youth in Iraq to start businesses. A lot of people tend to be unemployed. They can gather, their friends together, build an app, try and fail. I mean, you got nothing to lose. Push it out to the market. Do something for free. Don't take any money for customers. Compete against the bigger businesses that cannot afford to offer free services like you. You can offer an app for free or a service for free, or break even just to cover the service provider, and you don't care because you're staying at home, blah blah blah. You don't worry about expenses. While a company that you're competing against, they have to spend millions of dollars for employees and assets and rent and electricity and all these things, and that's a challenge. So I think this should be encouraging Iraqis to become entrepreneurs, not discourage them.
Yeah, thank you so much. Definitely, uh, just like you said, I mean, we have a lot of opportunities here in Iraq for the youth to look for and to follow them, and in order to find a solution for that problem, and also provide it and make a business out of it. So, just like you said, or in other words, make a business out of a problem. We can put it in this way. Um, uh, Thank you so much for your experience. Although our session got really more like got really out of the time that we had, but I just wanted to elaborate more and clearly on the on the fintech in Iraq, because it's a really you can say a sensitive topic and important as well for people to know. And also myself, I got really interested, and also our audience seems to be to get really interested in it. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciated having you as our guest and sharing your insight, picking up your mind about the fintech scene in Iraq, and also how Pure Platform became to be what it is now since 2019. Uh, so yeah, thank you so much. We can wrap it up if you don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Muhammad, and I appreciate it. And thank you for whoever joined today. And if you have any questions beyond the session, you can reach out to my LinkedIn profile, and I believe it's listed maybe in the somewhere on your site as part of this.
Yeah,
Yeah. So just reach out maybe to Muhammad or one of the staff members, and reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions.
definitely. Definitely, thank you so much for your for insight again, and also thank you so much for audience for keeping up with us, and then watching through the whole session. I hope you got a lot of, I mean, I'm sure that you got a lot of great information out of it, and I hope you have a great rest of the night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye bye, all of you. Good night.
Good night.